Hospital beeps brought him back to the world of the living. Michael Donovan opened his eyes after 2 weeks in a coma, but the months lived with the enigmatic Joseph in the mountain cabin still reverberated in every cell of his body. The smell of antiseptic replaced the scent of pine trees, while his exhausted wife held his hand with fragile hope. "Daddy!" Emma's voice filled the barren room, her small arms wrapping around it carefully. The former billionaire fraudster now saw with crystal clarity. His true sentence would not be served in a cell, but in the reconstruction of what really mattered. In the corner of the room, watching silently, an elderly man with blue eyes smiled before disappearing through the door. Constant beeps, distant voices, pain. Michael opened his eyes slowly, the fluorescent light obscuring his vision. A hospital room materialized around him. White walls, medical equipment, the characteristic smell of antiseptic. "He's waking up," a feminine, familiar, and emotional voice. "Doctor, he's waking up!" A blurred figure approached. Gradually, the face of his wife, Catherine, came into focus. Eyes red from crying, unkempt hair, exhausted expression but illuminated by hope. "Michael, can you hear me?" His voice trembled. He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. A doctor appeared, checking her vital signs. "Mr. Donovan, welcome back. You have had a serious accident. He was in a coma for 2 weeks." 2 weeks? Michael blinked, confused. Her journey with Joseph had seemed to last months. "The car?" he managed to murmur. "It fell into the Hudson River," Catherine explained, holding his hand. "A fisherman saw the accident and dived to save it. It was a miracle that you survived." A miracle. The word echoed in his mind. Over the next few days, as he recovered, Michael tried to organize his thought. The accident was real. The coma was real. But what about Joseph? The island, the cabin on the mountain, the flood? Everything seemed as vivid, as real as the hospital room where I was now. "Daddy!" Emma's voice filled the room when she was finally able to visit him. She ran to hug him, careful not to hurt her wound. Michael felt tears in his eyes as he hugged his daughter. How could he neglect something so precious? "I missed Princess," she whispered. "Me too, Dad. Mom said you were sleeping to get better, and now I'm awake," he smiled. "And I promise I'll never miss a recite of yours." Catherine watched the scene with puzzled expressions. This wasn't the Michael I knew, the workaholic obsessed. When Emma left with the nanny, Catherine sat down by the bedside. "What happened to you, Michael? You seem different." He hesitated. How to explain something that even he himself did not fully understand. "I almost died, Kate," he said finally, "and I realized that I was living everything wrong, that I was missing what really mattered." Are you enjoying this story of transformation? Leave your like and share it with those who need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the continuation. A week later, Michael was discharged from the hospital. Returning home, the luxurious Manhattan mansion that was once his pride, everything seemed strangely empty, shallow. "Something wrong?" asked Catherine, noticing his expression as he watched the marble and crystal living room. "No," he smiled faintly, "just realizing how much we have space." The next morning, his lawyer and longtime friend, David, came to visit him. "The situation is serious, Mike," he explained bluntly. "Fraud investigations are advancing. The council wants his definitive removal. Shareholders are suing. We can fight, but..." "No," interrupted Michael. "We are not going to fight." David looked at him shocked. "What are you talking about? It's your company, your life." "It was," corrected Michael, "and it was built on lies. You know this better than anyone, Dave. We helped create this system." "Mike, did you hit your head harder than we imagined? We're talking billions of dollars." Michael stood up with difficulty, still recovering from his injury. "I'll confess everything, David. I will take responsibility. I'll give back what I can." "You're going to jail." "Maybe, but for the first time in years, I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror." David stormed out, convinced that the accident had affected his friend's brain. Catherine, who had heard everything from the door, entered the office with a confused expression. "Are you serious? Are you going to give it all up?" "I'm not giving up, Kate. I'm choosing what really matters." He took his hand. "I know I was a bad husband, an absent father. I know you've stayed with me all these years more for comfort and Emma than for love." She lowered her eyes, unable to deny it. "I don't want to live like this anymore," he continued. "I don't want Emma to grow up seeing her father as a rich criminal or a fugitive. I want her to be proud of, even if it means losing all of that." He gestured to the surrounding mansion. Catherine studied it at length. "Who are you, and what did you do to my husband?" For the first time in years, they laughed together. "Are you following this incredible journey of redemption? Leave your comment saying what you think will happen to Michael. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any episodes." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Michael confessed to the authorities the company's fraudulent practices, providing documents and evidence. As expected, he was indicted for financial fraud, market manipulation, and tax evasion. The press had a field day. CEO confesses to crimes after near-death experience. Donovan swaps mansion for cell. The mansion was sold to pay part of the restitution. Catherine and Emma moved into a modest apartment in Brooklyn, ironically, not far from where Michael had grown up. On the eve of his trial, Michael sat with Emma in the small garden of the apartment. "Daddy's going to have to be away for a while," he explained gently. "Because of what you did wrong at work?" she asked, surprising him with her realization. "Yes, Princess. I made wrong choices, and now I need to fix it." "But you're doing the right thing now, aren't you?" Michael felt his eyes water. "I'm trying, Emma. I'm trying." "Then I'll be proud of you," she said simply, hugging him. "And I'm going to play the piano every day for you to listen to when you come back." In court, Michael pleaded guilty to all charges. His lawyer had negotiated a deal. In exchange for his full cooperation, he would receive a reduced sentence, 3 years in a minimum security federal prison. Upon hearing the sentence, Michael felt a strange peace. He looked out into the gallery where Catherine and Emma were watching. His daughter waved, and he returned with a trembling smile. As he was led out of the courtroom, he noticed an elderly man watching him from the crowd. White hair, tanned, skin, piercing blue eye. For a moment, Michael froze. It was impossible, but "Joseph," he whispers. The man smiled and nodded slightly before disappearing into the crowd. The Federal Correctional Institution of Danbury was nothing like the prisons in the movies. There was no constant violence or threatening gangs, at least not in the minimal security wing where Michael was placed. Still, it was a prison. Rigid routine, limited freedom, non-existent privacy. For the first few months, Michael remained isolated. The Billionaire former CEO was a curiosity to the other inmates, many of whom were there for similar financial crimes. "Hey, Donovan," one of them called during lunch. "I heard that you surrendered voluntarily. Is it true, or is it an urban legend?" "That's true," Michael replied simply. "Dude, you're crazy. I spent millions trying to escape, and here we are," Michael noted. "The difference is that my daughter knows I'm trying to fix my mistakes." Over time, Michael found purpose even within the prison walls. He began to teach financial literacy classes to other inmates. Many were there for small fraud, born more of ignorance than of malice. "Most of you will leave here one day," he explained in his classes, "and they will face a world that does not easily forgive ex-convicts. But understanding how money works, how to build something legitimate, that can be the difference between coming back here or building a new life." The prison director, impressed by the initiative, expanded the program. Soon, Michael was coordinating a full course in ethical entrepreneurship and personal finance. Catherine and Emma's visits were its highlight. Every 2 weeks, she watched her daughter grow up, listening enthusiastically about her piano lessons, her favorite books, her dream. "You know, Dad," Emma said during a visit at the age of 11, "the kids at school asked why I'm happy to have a dad in prison. I said I'm proud that you chose to do the right thing, even though it's hard." Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. "You're wiser than I've ever been, Princess." Catherine had changed too. She was now working as an art teacher, her passion abandoned when she married the ambitious executive. Gradually, a new connection grew between them, more honest, deeper than before. "I never thought I'd say this," she confessed on a visit, "but we're happier now than when we had everything." Is this story touching your heart? Leave your like and subscribe to the channel to follow Michael's journey to the end. Share it with someone who needs inspiration today. In the second year of his sentence, Michael was allowed to participate in the prison's gardening program. A small piece of land behind the prison complex had been designated for growing vegetables that supplied the kitchen. For someone who had never planted anything before the experience with Joseph, Michael surprised everyone with his knowledge of organic farming. His hands, previously used only to signing millionaire contracts, now worked the land with skill and respect. "Where did you learn all this, Donovan?" asked the guard in charge of the program. Michael smiled. "Let's say I had a good teacher during my coma. The garden became his sanctuary. In the hours he spent there, he felt connected to Joseph's cabin, to this life that might have been just a dream, or maybe something more. One day, while working in the garden, he noticed an elderly inmate watching him from afar. The man had gray hair and wore simple glasses. Michael had never seen him before. "Can I help?" asked Michael, wiping the sweat from his brow. The man approached slowly. "You don't recognize me, do you? I'm Robert Keller." Michael froze. Robert Keller had been a small investor who had lost everything, absolutely everything, in his company's fraudulent scheme. His case had been specifically mentioned during the trial. "Mr. Keller," Michael could barely speak. I didn't know I was here. Insurance fraud," the the man explained with a sad smile. After I lost my pension in your scheme, I tried to recover some money in a way creative. It didn't work. Michael felt the weight of guilt like never before. It was one thing to admit his crimes in the abstract. It was quite another to face one of his victims face to face. I don't know what to say, he finally admitted. Excuses seem insufficient. I didn't come to look for excuses, Keller replied. I came because I heard about your financial education program. I want to participate. Michael looked at him incredulously. After everything I've done? Precisely for this reason. Who better to teach about the dangers of the financial system than someone who knows all the tricks? Keller paused. Also, I heard that you have changed. I want to see for myself. That meeting turned into an unlikely partnership. Keller, a former math teacher, brought new dimensions to Michael's educational program. Together, they developed a curriculum that not only taught finance, but business ethics. True wealth, Michael often said in his classes, is not what you accumulate, but what you build that benefits others. The prison garden thrived under his care, as did the educational program. When a storm threatened to destroy the entire plantation, Michael led an effort to build a makeshift drainage system that saved the garden. Have you done this before? Asked one of the inmates, impressed by the ingenuity of the solution. Michael smiled, remembering the flooding in the village. Let's just say I learned about storms the hard way. Are you thrilled by this story of redemption? Leave your comments saying which part touched your heart the most. Don't forget to sign up to follow the outcome of this inspiring journey. The day of liberation came after 2 years and 4 months. Reduction for good behavior. Michael walked out of the prison gates wearing simple clothes, carrying only a small suitcase with his belongings. Catherine and, Emma waited outside. His daughter, now almost 12, ran to hug him. Welcome back, Dad? Catherine moved closer more slowly, a wary smile on her lip. Ready to start over? More than ever, he replied, hugging her. The world had changed during his time in prison. His old company had been restructured under new leadership. His name was still mentioned occasionally in articles on business ethics, usually as a negative example, although some more recent ones mentioned his voluntary confession and prison work. The Brooklyn apartment looked like a palace after years in a cell. That night, Emma insisted on playing the piano for him, a complex piece she had practiced for months, especially for that moment. It's beautiful, Michael said emotionally. You're amazing, you know? I played every day as I promised, she smiled. Rebuilding a life after prison was not easy. No prestigious company would hire an ex-convict of financial fraud. Michael didn't care. He had enough saving, what was left after restitution and fines, to support his family modestly as he pursued his new path. Surprising everyone, including himself, Michael decided to continue the work he had begun in prison. He founded a small nonprofit focused on financial education for low-income communities and former inmates. Infinite Goodness, the name he chose in honor of his journey, began in a small rented room in the Bronx. Robert Keller, who had been released a few weeks after Michael, became his first collaborator. Do you think it will work? Asked Catherine as she helped organize the room for the first workshop. I don't know, Michael admitted, but I know that's what I'm supposed to do. The first workshop attracted only 7 people, the second 12. In the third month, they had to move to a larger space to accommodate 50 regular participants. A year after his release, Michael received an unexpected phone call. Mr. Donovan, this is Jennifer Lawson of the Department of Justice. We are developing a national financial education program for fraud prevention. We would like to discuss a potential partnership with your organization. Michael could hardly believe it. Why us? There are certainly larger organizations with more resources, none with your unique perspective, she replied. We need someone who knows the system from the inside and has chosen to change it. The partnership with the government expanded the reach of Infinite Goodness to the entire country. Michael traveled frequently, lecturing at universities, prisons, and underserved communities. His story of fall and redemption resonated with people from all walks of life. At one of these lectures in Seattle, a young executive approached after the event. Mr. Donovan, your story changed my life, he said emotionally. I was following the exact same path as you, prioritizing success at any cost, neglecting my family. After hearing you talk 6 months ago, I quit my toxic job and started my own business based on ethical principles. Stories like this have become commonplace. Each month, Michael received dozens of emails and letters from people whose lives had been impacted by his work. Is this story inspiring you to make changes in your own life? Leave Leave your like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and redemption. Don't miss the exciting finale of this journey. The building that housed the Infinite Kindness headquarters in Brooklyn was unimpressive at first glance. A renovated old red brick warehouse with limited resources. Its modest facade contrasting dramatically with the glass and steel skyscrapers that Michael Donovan had once commanded. Yet for the thousands of people whose lives had been transformed by their programs over the past 5 years, that simple building represented something far more valuable than any corporate empire. It represented hope. On that particularly vibrant fall morning, Michael walked through the main lobby, greeting by name every employee and volunteer he encountered. His temples now bore silver threads, lines of expression marking the corners of his eyes, no longer from stress and frustrated ambition, but from genuine laughter and compassion practiced daily. He wore simple but well-groomed clothes, khakis, blue shirt with rolled-up sleeves, comfortable shoes, nothing to suggest that this man had ever been one of the most powerful and feared executives on Wall Street. Michael's office on the third floor was a modest room with glass walls, a deliberate choice that symbolized the transparency that now defined his life. On his recycled wood table, a pile of mail awaited his attention. On top was a particularly elegant envelope with the letterhead of Columbia University. 5 years had passed since his early release from federal prison. 5 years of tireless work, building the infinite goodness from a small local initiative to a nationally recognized organization. What had begun as impromptu financial literacy workshops in a rented room in the Bronx had grown into a comprehensive network of programs. Financial literacy for underserved communities, reintegrating ex-offenders into society, mentoring at-risk youth, and more. Over the years, Michael had received several offers to turn the organization into a profitable venture. Venture capitalists, impressed by the growth and impact of the initiative, had proposed substantial injections of capital in exchange for a business restructuring. The latest offer, from a media conglomerate interested in turning its story into a financial self-help franchise, had arrived the week before, a 7-figure check just as an advance. Michael had refused them all without hesitation. "Our mission is to help, not to get rich again," he repeated firmly at each board meeting. "The moment we start thinking about profit over purpose will be the moment we lose our essence." This philosophy, initially received with skepticism by some members of the council, had proved surprisingly sustainable. Foundation grants, government partnerships, and an innovative community microfinance model kept the organization not only running, but expanding organically. Catherine Donovan entered the office without knocking, bringing with her the soft scent of acrylic paint and fresh clay. At 45, she radiated a confidence and vitality that had been absent during the years of her marriage to the old Michael. Her brown hair, now cut in a practical style that framed her face, sported gray streaks that she refused to cover. She wore paint-stained jeans and a baggy linen blouse, the unofficial uniform of the director of the organization's arts program. "I just got confirmation from the gallery in Manhattan," he announced, sitting in the chair in front of Michael's desk. "They will host the exhibition of our artists in January. Main space, cocktail opening, press coverage, everything." Michael smiled, genuinely impressed. Catherine's transformation was perhaps even more remarkable than her own. The woman who had once defined herself primarily as wife of now led one of the organization's most innovative programs, using artistic expression as a therapeutic tool for ex-offenders and at-risk youth. "This is extraordinary, Kate. How many artists will participate?" 23, including Marcus Johnson. His eyes sparkled at the mention of the name. Marcus had been one of the first ex-inmates to participate in the program, a man who had served 15 years for armed robbery and who had discovered through Catherine's classes an exceptional talent for sculpture. His work, created from discarded materials, now attracted the attention of serious collectors. "Did he finish the series about redemption?" asked Michael, referring to the set of sculptures Marcus had been working on for nearly a year. "Last night, the final piece is..." Catherine paused, searching for the right words. "It's transcendent, Michael. There is no other word. You need to see it." The conversation was interrupted when Emma Donovan burst through the door, a vibrant energy of youth and purpose instantly filling the office. At 16, Emma was a fascinating combination of both parents' physical traits. Catherine's expressive eyes, Michael's captivating smile, but her personality was entirely her own. He wore the uniform of the prestigious LaGuardia High School School of Music and Art, his backpack heavy with sheet music and books. "Sorry for the delay," he said, letting his backpack fall to the ground with a dull thud. "The student committee meeting took longer than expected. We are organizing a benefit concert to raise funds for the music program in public schools." Michael watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and admiration that still surprised him in its intensity. Emma was not only an extraordinarily talented pianist, having recently received a preliminary letter of interest from Juilliard, but also a dedicated volunteer in her parents organization, leading a music mentorship program for children from underserved communities. What impressed Michael most, however, was how Emma had turned what might have been a traumatic experience, growing up with a father in federal prison, into a source of strength and empathy. Instead of hiding this chapter of her story, she had incorporated it into her identity, often sharing it in her motivational speeches to young people facing adversity. "I've got news," Michael said, picking up the envelope from Columbia University. "I received an invitation to give a lecture on business ethics to the MBA class." Emma raised her eyebrows in impressment. "Columbia? Wow, Dad, that's amazing." "Ironic, isn't it?" Michael commented with a self-ironic smile, twirling the envelope between his fingers. "The fraudster teaching ethic." Catherine leaned forward, her eyes meeting his with intensity. "The former fraudster who paid his debt and dedicated his life to fixing the system," she corrected firmly. "There's a big difference, Michael. A difference you need to stop minimizing." Emma nodded emphatically. "Mommy is right. His story is exactly what those future executives need to hear. Not from some theoretical professor who never faced real temptations, but from someone who was there, made wrong choices, paid the price, and found a better way." Michael felt that familiar surge of gratitude that often surprised him at times like this. How was it possible that, after losing everything he had once held dear, he had found something infinitely more precious? "I'll accept," he decided, picking up a pen to respond to the invitation. "But on one condition. I want it to be an event open to the public, not just for MBA students, and I want it to be free." Over the next few weeks, Michael meticulously prepared his talk, revisiting painful chapters of his past that he had not examined for a long time. He reviewed documents from his trial, reread articles about the collapse of his company, even watched old interviews where his former self, arrogant, defensive, completely blind to his own moral failings, defended practices that now disgusted him. The process was surprisingly cathartic. Each memory revisited, each mistake confronted, further solidified his understanding of how profoundly he had changed, not just his external circumstances, but his most fundamental being. On the morning of the lecture, Michael woke up before dawn. He sat on the small balcony of his Brooklyn apartment, watching the sky gradually light up over the urban skyline. The apartment, modest but comfortable with 3 bedrooms and a cozy living room, where Emma's piano took pride of place, was all her family needed. Emma sometimes joked about how shocked her friends were to discover that the founder of Infinite Kindness lived in an ordinary apartment and took the subway to work. "They expect a mansion and a driver at the very least," he said, laughing. "I have to explain that wealth means different things to different people." Catherine met him on the porch, handing him a cup of coffee. He sat next to him in comfortable silence, both contemplating the day that was beginning. "Nervous?" he asked finally. "Not about the lecture itself," Michael replied after a moment of reflection. "More about facing that world again. Wall Street, Academy, people who knew me before." Catherine covered his hand with hers. "You're not that person anymore, Michael, and anyone who can't see that isn't really looking." The Columbia University auditorium was beyond capacity that autumn afternoon. What had initially been planned as a lecture to an MBA class had grown into an event that had attracted hundreds of people, students from various departments, professors, journalists, and, as Michael noted with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, several familiar faces from his days on Wall Street. In the front row, Catherine and Emma offered silent support. Next to them was Robert Keller, the former investor who had lost everything in Michael's schemes and who was now one of the directors of Infinite Goodness. Their unlikely friendship, forged in the most unlikely circumstances of federal prison, was a living testimony to the possibility of redemption and reconciliation. When Michael took the stage, the auditorium fell silent. He adjusted the microphone, looked at the diverse audience, and took a deep breath. "Many of you know me as the man who built an empire based on lies and then confessed everything," he began, his voice firm and clear. "Others know me for the work I've been doing in recent years with Infinite Goodness. Both versions are true. I am the man who fell and the man who got up, And that's precisely why I'm here today. For 2 hours, Michael led the audience through his journey. Not a sanitized or self-congratulatory version, but a brutally honest account. He detailed not only the practicalities of how his fraudulent scheme had worked, but also the gradual moral corrosion that had allowed him to rationalize every ethical transgression, every cross line. The most dangerous thing was not the obviously unethical big decisions, he explained, but the small daily concessions, the harmless lie at a board meeting, the figure slightly manipulated in a quarterly report, the email accidentally not forwarded to a regulator. Each small ethical commitment weakens your resistance to the next, slightly larger one. With clinical precision, Michael dissected the psychology behind his past choices, the underlying fear of inadequacy that fueled his unbridled ambition, the emotional disconnect that allowed him to ignore the impact of his actions on real lives, the illusion of invulnerability that accompanies power and privilege. But the lecture wasn't just about falling in blame. With the same ruthless honesty, Michael shared his transformation, the moment of near-fatal clarity in the Hudson River, the deeply spiritual experience during his coma, described in a way that left room for both religious and psychological interpretation, and the slow, painful process of reconstruction after his release from prison. True success, he concluded, his voice charged with restrained emotion, is not measured by what you accumulate, but by the positive impact you have on the lives of others. It took me almost dying to learn this. I hope you are wiser than I was. The silence that followed was deep, almost reverent, before the room erupted in applause. The question and answer session that followed was equally intense. Students and faculty exploring ethical nuances, former Wall Street colleagues questioning the specifics of financial regulation, journalists delving into the broader societal implications of its history. When the event finally ended, a line formed of people wanting to speak briefly with Michael. He attended to each one patiently, the MBA student struggling with pressures to compromise values in his internship, the ethics professor interested in developing a case study based on her experience, the former inmate inspired to start his own reintegration program. It was while talking to a small group of particularly engaged students that Michael saw him, an elderly man watching him from the back of the auditorium. Even from a distance, he instantly recognized the snow-white hair, the impossible blue eyes, the serene smile that seemed to contain the wisdom of ages. His heart raced dramatically, a wave of heat rising through his neck. "Excuse me," he muttered to the student, abruptly interrupting the conversation. The man turned and left through a side door. Michael followed him, moving as quickly as he could through the crowd still present, ignoring calls from people wanting his attention. Something primordial, stronger than reason, impelled him to follow that familiar figure. The side door led to a quiet garden on campus, a small oasis of green surrounded by stone academic buildings. Centuries-old trees displayed foliage in vibrant shades of red and gold, a gentle breeze occasionally shedding leaves that danced in the air before landing on the stone path. The elderly man was standing near a small fountain, watching the water bubbling quietly. He seemed perfectly at ease, as if he had always belonged to that place. "Joseph," called Michael, his voice almost cracking, a mixture of incredulity, hope, and a deeper emotion he couldn't name. The man turned slowly. There was no doubt about it was him. The same face wrinkled by the sun and time, the same piercing eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances, the same gentle smile that conveyed unconditional acceptance. It was the man who had guided him through his journey in the coma, the mentor who had helped him rediscover his humanity in the mountain hut. "Hello, Michael," Joseph smiled, his voice exactly as Michael remembered, melodious, calm, with a timeless quality that didn't belong entirely to the modern world. "You gave a beautiful talk." "You're real," Michael stammered, unable to articulate more complex thought. His rational mind struggled to reconcile this man's physical presence with the belief that Joseph had merely been a construct of his brain, deprived of oxygen during the coma. "I didn't imagine everything." Joseph tilted his head slightly, his smile widening. There was something in his eye, a glint of amusement perhaps, or an understanding that transcended worldly categories. "Real? Imagine?" Joseph shrugged in a surprisingly youthful gesture for someone of his apparent age. "These distinctions matter less than you think. What really matters is what you did with the second chance you were given." Michael stepped forward, a dozen questions competing for precedence in his mind. "Who are you really?" he insisted, choosing the most fundamental one. Joseph considered the question for a moment, as if pondering how much much he could or should reveal. When he answered, his voice had a musical, almost hypnotic quality. Just someone who shows up when people like you are ready to change, he said finally. Some call me an angel, others a conscience. Some see me as a manifestation of the divine, others as a projection of the subconscious. The name, the category, the explanation, none of that really mattered. Did you show up for other people? Michael asked, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what he was hearing. Many, Joseph confirmed, his eyes momentarily distant, as if contemplating countless encounters through time. Over eons, in different forms, different names, different contexts. Some choose the path you have chosen, accept guidance, embrace transformation, return to heal what they have hurt. Others don't. A glimmer of sadness crossed his face. Free will is both a blessing and a burden. Michael felt his legs weaken. He sat on a nearby bench, trying to process the implications of what he heard. If Joseph was real, if all of that was real in some way, then the universe was infinitely more mysterious and interconnected than his old materialist view allowed him to conceive. The island, the hut, the mountain, the flood, the village, Michael enumerated. Every vivid memory in his mind, even after all these years. None of this existed. That was all, what? A hallucination? A near-death experience? Joseph sat down next to her on the bench, movement fluid and graceful. Up close, Michael noticed details that his memory had preserved with astonishing precision. The small, crescent-shaped scar near his left temple, the gnarled hands with prominent vein, the subtle smell of sandalwood, and something older, more elemental. It existed for you, Joseph replied, his voice gentle but firm, and it was real enough to change his life. Isn't that the true measure of reality? That which has the power to transform? Michael contemplated this perspective, finding in it a truth that resonated beyond conventional logic. After all, regardless of the ontological nature of his experience with Joseph, the effects were undeniably real. His moral transformation, his reconnection with his humanity, his rediscovery of what truly mattered. Why me? He asked at last, the question that had haunted him silently for years. Why give me a second chance? I didn't deserve it. There were better, more dignified people. Joseph looked him straight in the eye, and in that moment Michael felt completely exposed, as if every layer of protection, every carefully constructed defense, every remaining self-deception was dissolved by that piercing gaze. Divine goodness does not choose only the deserving, Michael, Joseph said, each word resonating with a truth that transcended specific doctrine. It extends to everyone who is willing to receive it. You were ready, even without knowing it. There was an opening in you, in the armor of self-sufficiency and materialism. That moment on the river, when he asked for help for the first time in decades, he was sincere, and sincere requests are always heard. They were silent for a few moments, watching students hurry through the garden, young men absorbed in their own dramas and discoveries, unaware of the extraordinary encounter taking place a few feet away. A golden leaf detached from a nearby ledge, floating gracefully before landing between them on the bank. I have come to take my leave, Joseph said finally, his voice carrying a soft but unmistakable finality. You don't need me anymore. Michael felt a tightness in his chest, a mixture of gratitude, understanding, and a twinge of loss. Will I see you again? He asked, knowing the answer even before Joseph answered. Joseph smiled, that smile that contained universes of understanding. Who knows? The paths of goodness are infinite and mysterious. Perhaps we will meet again in another form, another context, or maybe you become to others what I was to you, a guide, a catalyst, a reminder of the possibility of transformation. He stood up with the same fluid grace, slightly adjusting the simple coat he was wearing. Before leaving, she put her hand on Michael's shoulder, that familiar touch that always conveyed so much: strength, acceptance, challenge, unconditional love. Keep up the good work, Michael, he said, his voice simultaneously near and far, as if speaking of multiple dimensions. And remember, each person you help is a spreading wave, touching lives you will never know. Goodness is the only force in the universe that multiplies when divided. Michael watched Joseph walk away down the stone path, his upright figure gradually diminishing with distance. There was nothing supernatural about his departure, no mystical disappearance, no special effects, just an elderly man walking quietly between academic buildings, eventually turning a corner and going out of sight. And yet, Michael felt that he had just witnessed something profoundly sacred, a piece that transcended understanding filled him completely, as if a circle that had begun years ago had finally closed. He remained in the garden for some time, processing the meeting until Catherine and Emma found him. "We were looking for you," Catherine said, sitting next to him. "Is everything okay? You left so abruptly?" Michael smiled, unable to fully articulate what he had just experienced. "I've never been better," he replied simply. "Just, I found an old friend." That evening, in their Brooklyn apartment, the Donovan family celebrated the success of the talk with a simple dinner prepared by everyone together. A weekly tradition they valued more than the dinners at starred restaurants of their previous life. After dinner, Emma sat at the piano in the living room. His fingers hovered momentarily over the keys before they began to play. Not a classic piece of his usual repertoire, but something original, something Michael had never heard before. The melody was extraordinary. It began with simple, almost hesitant notes that gradually developed in complexity and depth. There was a narrative quality to the composition, a sense of journey, of struggle, of discovery, and ultimately of peace. The harmonies evoked both sadness and hope, both loss and renewal, interwoven into a cohesive whole that transcended apparent contradiction. As the last chords gently dissipated into the air, Michael realized he had tears in his eyes. "It's beautiful," he said, genuinely moved. "Absolutely beautiful. When did you write that? What inspired you?" Emma turned on the piano bench, an enigmatic smile on her young but somehow old face. "I finished last night. I've been working on it for months, but the last bits have finally come to me." He paused, his eyes meeting his father's with unusual intensity. "It's called The Infinite Goodness." "A perfect title," commented Catherine, also visibly moved by the piece. "It perfectly captures the essence of the work we do." "That's not what inspired me," Emma said softly, "or at least not directly." He hesitated, as if considering whether he should continue. "It was a strange dream that I have had, recurring, about an old man in a mountain hut." Michael froze, his heart racing dramatically. Catherine, noticing his reaction, looked at him with puzzled expression. "An old man?" repeated Michael, his voice almost a whisper. "In a cabin?" Emma nodded, her distant eyes as if visualizing the scene. "He has snow-white hair and the bluest eyes I've ever seen. He lives in a simple cabin on top of a mountain, overlooking the ocean. In the dream, he tells me that divine goodness is like a wave that never stops spreading, touching lives beyond what we can see or comprehend." Michael and Catherine exchanged looks of absolute amazement. Michael felt a wave of goosebumps run through his entire body. Did you dream of it?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "Several times," Emma confirmed, curiously observing the parents' intense reaction. "It started when you were in the hospital, in a coma. The man in the dream, he said his name was Joseph, told me not to worry, that you were fine, that you were learning important lessons, and that you would come back to us transformed." Michael felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The implication was extraordinary, almost incomprehensible, that somehow, as he experienced his journey with Joseph on the mountain, his daughter was connected to the same experience through her dream. Dreams felt so real, Emma continued, unaware of the profound impact of her words. "Sometimes he would show me things, you working on a garden, fixing a roof, saving people from a flood. Other times we just talked about things like forgiveness, purpose, connection. He taught me that even the most painful experiences can be transformed into something beautiful and meaningful." Michael hugged his daughter, unable to hold back the tears that were now flowing freely. "The goodness really is infinite," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "It's mysterious, far beyond what we can comprehend." Later that night, after Emma had gone to sleep, Michael shared with Catherine the entirety of his coma experience, details he had never fully revealed before, fearing they would sound like delusions or fabrication. He told of Joseph, the cabin, the lessons on the mountain, the flood, and finally, that afternoon's meeting on the Columbia campus. Catherine listened without interruption, her face reflecting a range of emotion: surprise, skepticism, wonder, and finally acceptance. "I always knew that something profound happened to you during those 2 weeks," he said finally. "No one changes so fundamentally without a transformative experience, but this goes beyond what I imagined possible. Beyond what any of us thought possible," Michael agreed. "And yet, And yet, here we are, Catherine added, taking his hand, living the consequences, reaping the rewards. Later, alone on the apartment's small balcony, Michael gazed out over the Brooklyn night sky. The stars were hard to see through the city's light pollution, but he knew they were there, constant, eternal, silent witnesses to countless human journeys of fall and redemption. His life had taken a turn he would never have imagined on that fateful night on the Hudson River. No longer defined by power, status, and material accumulation, but by service, connection, and love. The paradox did not escape him. When he lost everything he had once considered valuable, he had found something infinitely more precious. "Thank you," he whispered to the partially visible stars, his voice carrying the gratitude of a man who had finally understood the true meaning of wealth. He knew, with a certainty that transcended conventional logic, that somehow, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to do harm, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. Were you moved by this story, inspired by the goodness of God? Leave your like, share it with those who need to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart and transform lives. Comment below which part touched your heart the most.